Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of AACRAO's Credential Chats. Really excited to be joined this week by Doris Savron. She is the Vice Provost for Colleges Assessment and Curriculum at University of Phoenix. Doris, thank you so much for being with us this week.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Really excited to have you because I've just been fan growing from afar some of the just really neat things that you and your colleagues are doing and the storytelling you're doing around it. One of the patterns that we're starting to see on these chats is more and more people realizing that as much as we think about creating credentials and issuing credentials, that that's just the first part of the life cycle, and that you and your colleagues are thinking about this systemically and what I feel like are just way ahead of the curve compared to most folks.
Well, thanks. Yes, it's been a topic of conversation actually for quite a long time. And we actually are framing it from the perspective of always listening to our learners and what is it that's going to be helpful to them to focus on getting that next best job as quickly as possible, and also acknowledging and honoring what they already know and what they've already experienced so that we're taking that in and making that part of their record. And one of the biggest things they've told us is we're learning a lot in the classroom and we know it's valuable, but we're having a hard time speaking the language of the employer when we start to go for those next steps. And so for us, getting to a framework of like really talking about skills and making skills part of the language of their learning environment was super important. So we started there. And because of that work, it's now allowing us to package collections of achievements to be able to give them additional credentials, which has been super exciting to watch.
I just love everything about this, but I need to back up a little bit. I love how the what next part, right? You I
Yes.
think you said two or three different times the what
Yeah.
next, and
Yes.
I think when we anchor, in, as long as we have our why, I'm starting to maybe get convinced that what next is the next most important question. And that, how was it internally to get to such a student-centered place of what next?
Yeah.
And, where were the different pockets of enthusiasm where you
Yeah.
had peers and counterparts who just got it?
Yeah. So actually, we just the spirit of our DNA and how the institution had actually started working adults, always needing to know, understand them and what they needed because it was very different than a traditional student coming into a higher ed environment. So it just was natural for us to continuously ask questions, understand who they were, understand what their challenges were, and then being able to pivot while also maintaining what it is that they're going to have to learn to be able to get to those next steps. So it started as, I mean, it's been an evolving conversation for quite a few years. And then we had a couple of people that said, hey, this challenge of employers also finding it hard to find talent. And then a survey, I think it's come out at the same time that the employers does not have confidence in higher ed, like you're not keeping up with what we need, were the two connecting points that took us to a whole nother level of thinking differently about how we design our programs. Like we know that there's also skills and things that are inherently packaged together, like learning how to think, learning how to solve and adapt that are a little bit harder to measure, but there's also skills that are very common for employers to be able to say every job really needs these kinds of things. And so we started looking at how we design programs and said, what are the program learning outcomes to what job categories? What are the main skills? We use Lightcast data, our advisory councils, and a lot of other data that's out there to say these are the skills to anticipate in the future. And then how do we package those at not just a program outcome, but how do we make those very transparent down to the course level? So we started with a couple of deans and faculty that were super excited and went with their programs first. We evolved the prototype and then shared it with the rest of the deans. And then pretty soon it became a strategic vision for our entire academic teams to really move in that direction. And it took us about 2.5 to 3 years to really get through all of our programs and courses. And now it's just about how do we stay up to date and use program health checks to really make sure we're staying current with the skills that are out there.
I mean, I think that there's a lot of us who would hear 2.5 to 3 years and think that that is lightning fast and just be consumed by our jealousy of you on that regard. You talk about, that there was just on from the academic side of things, with faculty, with deans, that there was enthusiasm. And, one of the things that I'm observing in y'all's work is that it's a lot of it is rooted in storytelling,
Yes.
right? That we are surfacing what the credential is credentialing. And am I just making things up, or did you like kind of find a sweet spot of having the academic side of the house and other sides like career services and student
Yeah.
success and your advisors from your employer councils, where even though there was different language and different ways of saying the same thing, people kind of had these light bulbs go off of, if we need different storytelling for different audiences
Yeah.
about the same thing, and nobody needs to be threatened by that.
Yes. Yeah. So skills was the common language. Like, how do we talk at that at the course level? And then knowing that we're capturing that assessment outcome to that skill into a central place, how can some of our other teams, like student services, that are advising students about their progress and celebrating with them? So our careers team then builds the products off of that. So they built a profile, which is our initial step into moving into CLR and LER. Like, how do we display that to the learners about what they're actually learning so they can self-report what they already come in with, and then we've got what they actually earn while they're in classes with us. So it's automatically this assessment, this threshold feeds to this profile of theirs that shows them a collection of skills along the way. And then the careers groups then work on products to say, okay, now that they have these set of collections, what if we married what jobs out there mention the majority of the skills you already have and nudge the learners about, hey, these jobs potentially align to the skills that you're earning, and how do we continue to evolve those products? And then with their career coaches, they can have conversations about, here's what you're learning. Make sure to highlight that when you're having conversations and preparing them for that interview. Not all students take advantage of all those potential resources, but they're there if they need them. And our biggest thing is, how do we continue to evolve what we're showcasing to them about them to empower them to tell their story? So whatever, then they can decide, well, I only want this piece of this story for this potential conversation, and give them the flexibility. And we learned early on that they just don't know what to do with that information yet, because even though they're adult learners, they assume that they have to wait till their credential is done, whatever they pick, before they can start thinking about the next steps. And so we had to teach them about careering early. And that's why the careers language and the skills language inside the curriculum helps reinforce that. This is why you're doing this activity. This is why it's going to be important in a real, environment, as this kind of role or job title based on the program you chose. And so they know which assessments are there and are measuring what skill, so that they're aware that these are important and relevant, that I need to pay attention.
I mean, that just so resonate. And like, when you're in grad school and you're learning about andragogy, and the first principle is with adult learners, they need to see front and center
Yep.
and immediacy of why I
Yeah.
should care about this
Yeah.
tomorrow. And so that's really cool that y'all are just on the front end doing that. I think that also for anybody who's watching this and heard some alphabet soup there when Doris says CLR, LR, that's comprehensive learner record, that's learning and employment records. And check out our credential chats with Rob Coyle from One Ed Tech a few weeks ago if you want a quick explainer on that. There's also plenty of resources that we can link to for those. But I think that one of the things that again just puts you and your colleagues on the cutting edge is a lot of us who are thinking about this stuff or who are watching this trying to learn and just take some of the best ideas into our practices. When we're hearing about LERs, when we're hearing about CLRs, I think that most of it is conceptually rooted in this. Here's this summative thing that we're giving you on the way out the door. Like we are equipping you with, it's going to have your transcript in, it's going to have your badges in, it's going to have other things in it. Have a great, very successful future. And you're talking about like, well, yeah, we're going to do that. And like, that's just the most recent touch point with the CLR, LER, in a process that actually starts a lot sooner than that.
Yeah, so it starts from the first conversations they have about what they're going to choose as their credential, and really talking about what's their why, like what is it that they're trying to achieve, and having that conversation. And then, in each course that they move along, it sets the context of that course in relationship to that credential that they're achieving, so that they can start to learn that connection really early on. And then as we bring in new products that our careers team is building, we look at when or where in the coursework or in the program should we introduce some of those products so that they get awareness, and then where are they introduced outside the classroom through their advisors to know that that service is available to them. Because not everybody, again, not everybody picks a track that they can career earlier than the credential itself, right? Like teaching, and some of those play or nursing even. But there are many that choose where you can, based on your background and your experience, you could move into different levels of jobs throughout the time that you're earning the credential that you've chosen. And so giving them that option and knowing how to do that. And we're finding that, there's a lot of awareness building of, even with the micro-credentials we built, because we talked about how do we showcase collections of skills as valuable, and how do we showcase skills that they're actually learning in gen eds? Because the number one comment we got from adult learners is, why do I have to take all these general education classes up front? And so like showing them the skills that are connected even in the general education and why those are important, and how those show up in places in our career relevant, was important. And that was a big aha for us, is like, how do we continue to teach them about narrating their story through the tools and the products that we offer them, so that those that are ready now have the availability, and those that are not and want to wait for a period of time then can do that later on. So it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah, and the more you talk about it, it also sort of resonates with the K-12 side of my brain. Anybody watching this with kids, and in most states, you have legislated some version of ICAPS, like individual career and academic planning, where starting as early as kindergarten, every year you are adding to this profile of what is the successful future that we're working towards to help you attain. And that's something that you are revisiting and iterating on throughout. And that your institution is viewing the LER as almost kind of an approach like that for adult learners that can meet them where they are, help them understand from where they came, and not only, tell them how to get to where they want to go, but maybe even help them identify new places that they didn't
Yeah.
know they wanted to go
Yeah.
based off of their skills.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's part of it too. Like that enables conversations with them and their advisors potentially. It enables conversations with them and their faculty. Sometimes they'll ask those questions in the classroom. And then other times it just gives them more information to consider as they're moving along. And so for us, it was just important to be able to continue to look at how do we evolve the profile of what they have today to something that's more comprehensive, that even brings in the things they do outside the classroom that have showcased skills, or the things that they've done prior to even coming to us, and making sure that that is packaged as well. We're not there yet. But how do they tell that whole story together, so that, they have the words and the things that they need to say to whoever they're having that conversation with, whether it's their current employer for that next promotion, or, a potential new employer for, a whole change in their career path.
Doris, in our last minute, I'm going to take us to what might be a really scary place for some people in our audience. Anyway, it's something that I'm passionate about that I have absolutely never mentioned my
Yeah.
job for fear that I will get run out if I bring it up with my colleagues. And I heard you talk about something that I call self-assertions,
Yeah.
that your learners can have the ability to actually post to
Yeah.
their LER, or that that's something you're considering at least, that they can
Yes.
put something to the LER and that is valid. And so, I'm just curious, and we're going to have to be way too brief. I apologize, but
Yeah.
just quickly, why is that maybe not scary? And where, even if you're not there yet, where are the conversations to, put in the guardrails to help assuage concerns that things that
Yeah.
might be asserted by the university
Yeah.
are visually and just very clearly distinguished from things that are being self-asserted by the learner,
Yeah.
just included in this
Yeah.
university envelope.
Yeah. In the current profile they have, it's different. Like it says, these are the ones I've entered and these are the ones I've earned through the University of Phoenix. So they're very separate. And I equated to, well, you're doing that on a resume when you're pulling together your whole work history and packaging what you know how to do in the story you're trying to tell. Today, when you go to speak to employers, why wouldn't we allow for some of that? And then it saves them time eventually, because the goal ultimately would be, how do we then enable that ecosystem to push some of that content into whatever the employer is digesting, whether it's still a resume PDF or whether it's another format, hopefully in the future that's more digital and digested, that it still would know, what was validated. And that's where like the skills achievements and the micro credentials would show those were earned, and then they can go behind the data to see what they actually had to do to demonstrate it versus the ones that they're self reporting. So I don't know that that's going away anytime soon, is having to be able to tell your own story of what you think you can do based on history, but how to help them really even speak that language will help, because we're giving them a list of skills to pull down from to be able to align to their work history so that they're speaking the same language when they're putting those together as well.
And I love how you took us for full circle. That's all about helping them with what next. And that it's very clear, it sounds like internally, that while it is appearing on or within official university containers, that there's no ownership or impression that the University of Phoenix is actually the one asserting these things. They're just
Correct.
a medium at that point. Doris, thank you so much. This has been just a rapid fire. We've covered so much ground, and hopefully, everybody else who watches this is doing the same degree of keg stands on your Kool-Aid as I am, because I think it is just so cool what y'all are doing, and that there's just so much the rest of us can learn and emulate of from your leadership already. So just thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for all that you're doing, and others who are showcasing tests and wins and acknowledgments. We're following all of those, and that's what helps us take our next steps of what we should be working on.
There you go. And Doris, that's a great invitation. If you have wins or even failures, we'll highlight those too here on AACRAO's Credential Chats. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and have a badge-worthy week.